Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone Podcast. We're live at the NAMM Show 2025, early in the morning. It's day one. Just waking up. Actually, I'm not just woken up. I had tons of traffic getting here, but I'm so happy to have Jeremiah True back on the podcast. We had an amazing episode last year. We just shared it again. Check it out. He shared a ton of great information, but we're at the PMauriat booth with Jeremiah True. It's great seeing you again.
Good to see you, Donna. And that was one of those things they don't teach you in college. There should be a course on how to navigate traffic
in LA
on the way to the gig or to the show or something. Just leave 7 hours early and you'll be fine.
especially where I live right now. Yeah, well, okay, we were just talking beforehand. He had a harrowing trip getting here that is just defies the odds. You can't make this stuff up. We won't get into it, but
I'll just say that I've traveled faster to Taiwan and Vietnam from my house in Kentucky than I managed to yesterday here in the good old US of A. It's amazing what a little bit of snow south of the Mason-Dixon line will do to create world chaos.
That's an awesome way to start the NAMM show. Woohoo!
Sleeping on the floor at ATL. That's great.
That's awesome. Oh, my God. All right. Well, listen, we have even really exciting news, actually. Really exciting news. And we're blocking a little bit over here. Look, okay.
Whoa, look at that.
Yeah, I got to bring it in. Look at that. I mean, look at that. That is really beautiful. We're going to be talking about the new Venus line from PMauriat. And, in a couple of interviews later, I'm going to be featuring Leah Conchaldi. And she's one of your artists now. And she's
Correct.
playing these horns. So tell me about these horns.
Awesome. And a plug for Leah. She will be our first PMauriat artist ever to play concert saxophone at the booth.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I know that there's going to be like an earthquake or something. No, I hope not. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm in California.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. Knock on wood. No, Leah's great. She's, plays multiple styles. She has played Barry Sax with Harry Styles. And she's actually going to be playing some concert tenor saxophone, which is going to be a rare delight here at NAMM on our Venus saxophones. And what's unique about the Venus is it's a 95% copper alloy saxophone. And a lot of saxophonists will get a copper neck to change the sound. Some say it increases projection. Some say it mellows your sound out.
Okay.
I say it just helps you sound like yourself a little bit better if you like the way that feels. And that's kind of what I think about the Venus. I've played the alto quite a bit. I've played the tenor quite a bit. And the copper itself is such a versatile metal that if you want to get that concert sound, if you need to play bolero, if you need to play Mussorgsky, you need to play, the old castle, but then you need to change your setup in your mind and play a gig at Jeff Ruby's and sound like Lenny Pickett, you can also do that on those horns so easily. And I'm convinced it's the hybrid construction, so the copper itself. But then what's interesting is they're on the PMauriat classic rolled tone hole chassis.
Okay.
So the 66 and the 67 are, but it has straight tone holes. The tone holes are drawn on what is typically considered a Germanic bore. So it's a larger bore diameter, larger bow, larger bell. And typically when you pair that with a rolled tone hole, you get a very omnidirectional kind of sound. I liken it to driving a muscle car on wet pavement. You got to know how to drive.
Wow,
And it's as fast as you want it. But what's interesting, it's a hybrid construction, so the tone holes are not rolled. And so in my mind, if you want a saxophone that's a little bit more between the lines, but not something that's truly what I call French construction, then the Venus is definitely something I would encourage you to try, because it splits all worlds of the saxophone so easily based on its construction. It's this hybrid construction. So you combine the bore size and those drawn tone holes with silver key work, black pearl buttons. You combine all of that, and you have a horn that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful instrument, but it also plays really, really well. And, sometimes I've heard some players will say, oh, the copper must be really bright. And I've heard other players say, oh, that copper must make it sound really dark.
This is interesting because
I play
trumpet. Yeah, I play trumpet, and a lot of times there's, silver horns are going to, more classical players play silver horns, and, silver plated, excuse me, and then other people will play, for jazz, they'll play, lacquer or gold plate or whatever. I think you said the magic word. I think it's a question of how it feels. And speaking of feel, I'm really curious. I haven't touched the horns yet. Are they heavier because they have the copper alloy?
I don't think so. I mean, let's be honest. Let me check here. I mean, that's a weighty saxophone to me. It's not overly heavy.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah. That. Okay, let me just say it this way. I think about cars and stuff like that. I've got a Highlander. That thing's like a Mack truck. And it feels durable. I feel safe in it. This is built solid. This is solid. This is a solid horn.
For sure. And, another great thing about the reason we picked the artists that we did to launch these horns is so kind of our East Coast launch. I don't know if he's from Long Island, but he teaches in New York, is Dr. Scott Latroff.
Okay.
And so Scott, once again, he could absolutely play the Creston Concerto from memory, play the Ingolf Dahl and just tear it up. But then if you need somebody to play R&B, Scott can do it. And so that's the same thing with Leah. She kind of has a foot in both of those worlds. But the reason we picked them is because that's kind of how I see these saxophones. Is, yes, any saxophone, if you're a good saxophonist, you're a professional musician, you should be able to play any style on any saxophone. And that's kind of what we talked about last year.
Yeah.
However, there are certain instruments that definitely make it a little bit easier sometimes, and that's how these Venus are, is they have a foot kind of in both worlds of the saxophone continuum, as it were, and it's really easy to bridge those styles on these instruments.
Question for you. People that do play classical and do play jazz, or even, I'm going to say this too, concert band, right? Not just the soloists and stuff like that, concert band, maybe jazz ensemble. What they're doing when they play this horn would probably be changing the mouthpiece, or does Leah change her mouthpiece when she goes from one style to another?
We'll find out on Saturday when she's here playing. I would say that she does. There were, because I've played in a lot of concert band.
Yeah.
I was in the the Air Force band, and there were times, depending, maybe you were playing, George Washington Bridge or some heavy-duty concert band piece, and then automatically you were in a Gershwin melody.
That's right, yeah.
And you kind of have to, there were, depending on what seat or chair I was playing, there were some times, if it was an extreme difference, that I would switch mouthpieces.
Okay.
And I would switch my setup. If you're going from, a concert band transcription of a Tchaikovsky piece, and then you're doing, country music medley, I might change my setup at that point. But a lot of times I would try and do it all on one mouthpiece and try and find that hybrid mouthpiece that would absolutely kind of do both of those things. And so that type of style switching is really easy to do on these instruments. Yep.
And listen, you may think that was a Captain Obvious question. Oh, just change the mouthpiece. But I got to be honest with you. Again, I play trumpet too. I try to do everything on one mouthpiece. I'm not a lead player. But, you get into these situations where you don't know. Like you may not even have time to switch your mouthpiece and switch your setup. And if you're playing cane reeds, then you got to worry about your reed drying out and all that kind of thing. So having the flexibility to be able to address multiple styles, I think, is really crucial.
I do too, and that's where I insert my shameless plug for the new Rousseau 3.0 mouthpieces, which are excellent, and hopefully you'll get to talk to the team over there at some point about those. But
I'm glad you said that, actually. I was thinking, should I ask him, what mouthpieces, he thinks works great for this? So Rousseau mouthpieces, Jody Jazz,
yes,
right? Jody Jazz booth.
For sure. And so I helped coordinate the North American launch of the Rousseau 3.0
awesome
mouthpieces. And, since Jody bought that brand and he moved construction to his shop in Savannah, the quality is incredible.
Yeah,
the consistency is incredible, and they're affordable. I mean, you can get an alto mouthpiece, a tenor mouthpiece. You're talking well under $200 You're talking something that anyone can afford, that a student can afford, somebody, a serious studier of the instrument can afford. And but doublers
too.
Great. And that's the thing, is they're all handmade. They're all hand finished, start to finish, at the Jody Jazz Factory. And if you're thinking about as a saxophone player or as a reed player, what you have to do the gig, you've got to have 4 saxophones. Really, if you're going to function, you need to have all of them. You need to be able to play the clarinet. You need to be able to do all these things, as we discussed last time. So you're already in it up to your neck to the tune of thousands of dollars on instruments. If you're going to thousands of dollars worth of mouthpieces, is insult to injury.
Yeah.
And that's what's amazing about the Rousseau mouthpiece is, you can go get an alto mouthpiece for, what is it, $164? Don't quote me on that. I don't have the price list memorized. But in that price range, and when you can do that, if you do 2 concert band gigs a year and primarily you're operating in a pop band, or you've got a solo thing going, or you're a jazz player, but you do get called, or you're going into the pit orchestra and you need something that's a lot more controlled, get a Rousseau. Get one of the, if you want the concert mouthpieces or even the jazz ones, the JDX, which is what I'm going to be playing Saturday. It's incredibly versatile. It's incredibly flexible. And you're not going to be like, oh, this mouthpiece is only $700. No, it's not. But it's still a boutique mouthpiece, handmade right here in the United States. So for one of our vendors, I did a series of videos where I played the Rousseau mouthpieces on these saxophones, and it's a great match.
You know what? I'm gonna want to find the links for that. Are they online?
They soon will be.
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
Okay. And listen, here's the other thing too. Jody Espina, he's an awesome guy, right? A great guy. I went to his factory last year in the summertime, took a whole tour. We've got a whole series of videos on the podcast website, saxophonepodcast.com, as well as our YouTube channel. You have to check it out because the factory, Jody is so organized, and the factory is so organized.
And meticulous.
Meticulous, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. And I know a lot of the PMauriat artists are also Jody Jazz artists, too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Some of, my great friend Kirk Whalum.
Yeah.
Is a Jody Jazz artist as well. Scott Latroff, Jody Jazz artist. Derek Brown. Yeah. And so when you have players of that caliber that are trusting these handmade mouthpieces, and the thing is, they're affordable.
Yeah, that's
like
important.
they're not unattainable, which is kind of how I see PMauriat saxophones. They're not $9,000 for an alto saxophone. It's not $11,000 for a tenor saxophone. Yes, there are some that are more expensive than others, but when you've got to make choices between rent, tuition, gas, and buying instruments, that's where you've got to really be honed in on performance and price, that intersection of performance and price.
Also, okay, and when you say performance, in my mind, I'm thinking durability, reliability. Mm-hmm. You don't want something that is going to have parts that your repairman doesn't have. That's important. People don't realize that. There's so many saxophone brands out there. A lot of them are incredible. Some of them, are lesser names than others, but one of the things, let me give this one tip while I'm thinking about it. If you have a pretty decent repair person in your area, hopefully you do. It's not easy for most people. But, say to them, hey, I'm thinking of looking about buying this particular horn. Make sure that they have the parts for that. And PMauriat is world renowned, so you're not going to have a problem with this brand.
Right. Parts. And that's, when I've, in other products completely unrelated to music, you'll see at different stores these different products that you can get, like, ATVs and four-wheelers at Lowe's and things like that. And I'm always saying, what kind of product support do they have? Can you get parts for that? And that's a great question to ask about instruments is, can we get parts? Can we get product support? And so I handle the product support side, and we have, a large selection of parts, at our warehouse in St. Louis Music. And so we do have parts availability. We have a parts pipeline. And so that's, yet another reason, we would like always for you to consider our instruments.
Yeah, so Jeremiah, let me ask you this, and this is for people that may not know the answer. You mentioned before rolled tone holes versus straight tone holes.
Correct.
Like what? Okay, who cares? What's the difference?
So most saxophones, the majority of saxophones, from student to professional, all of your major brands, whether they come from France or Asia, have what are called drawn tone holes. And a drawn tone hole is when you make a saxophone, you have your body tube and you have your bell. And then there is a special type of drill bit that punctures the brass. It's a drill press that punctures the brass, and it fits into a bit on the other side of the brass, and then that drill press pulls that auger up, and that draws the tone hole out of the body of the instrument. And then the tone hole is typically trimmed, polished, made sure that the height is correct and that it's perfectly even all around. And that's, a lot of folks will refer to that as your traditional drawn French tone hole. So, major instrument makers from France typically all use those drawn tone holes. However, there were instrument makers elsewhere in Europe and here in America in the 1950s, 1960s, 1940s that made rolled tone holes. So what that means is the tone hole is drawn, just like I said before, same process, and then the top, it's a complicated process. The top is crimped over, so it's rolled. Kind of a really rough example is if you had like a brown paper lunch bag and you roll the top back.
Oh, got it. Okay, yeah.
So similar to that. And what that does is that provides a greater surface area for the pad to seal.
Okay.
So with a rolled tone hole instrument, many repair technicians will say your pads will last longer and there's a greater surface area, so that if you have your horn gets knocked around or something in transit or in the case, that rolled tone hole is a lot more forgiving around that pad. One other kind of, I don't know if this is an unintended consequence of a rolled tone hole, but it is a consequence, is that turns into a very free-blowing instrument because there's actually a little less distance the air and the sound have to travel out of that tone hole. So when you combine a rolled tone hole instrument, the rolled tone hole, with an enlarged bore diameter, an enlarged bow, and an enlarged bell, all of a sudden you have an extremely free-blowing instrument. And so PMauriat, we make both. So our System 76 series is all traditional French design and the standard drawn tone holes. Our R series, 66R for tenor, 67R for alto, has rolled tone holes. And that's going to be for a player that wants a wide open tonal palette and for a player that wants a very free-blowing instrument. Some saxophone players love it. Some hate it.
Because they want more resistance.
They want that resistance.
Yeah.
And that resistance is familiar. Most of us grew up with that resistance. A lot of us have played, French saxophones at some point in our life, or even the Japanese manufacturers follow that same kind of construct. And a rolled tone hole has generally been associated with Germanic instruments. So a Germanic bore, Germanic bow, Germanic bell, everything's a little bit larger. But what's unique about the PMauriat is it's French-style keywork. So it's a comfortable hand feel, fingers are nice and close together, everything's very ergonomic, but you have that large Germanic bell that gives you an unlimited tonal palette. And rolled tone holes, that also.
Let me ask this question. I apologize for the noise in the background. We're hoping we're not catching all of that.
It's almost that time.
I know. It's just crazy, though. Normally I get here early, and you don't hear all of this. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's in the air. But anyway, okay, larger bore, right, larger bell, all that kind of thing. More air, requires more air.
It's hard for me to be objective on that because I've been a bass player for most of my career, so I've always had to use a ton of really fast air, not just a large air column and a large volume, but really, really fast air.
Got it.
And so when I pick up a rolled tone hole, alto or tenor, I'm still using the same type of air column. I still approach it the same way, for better or worse. And I know that one of our artists, Scott Paddock, who has the Scott Paddock Sax School, he plays only rolled tone hole altos and tenors. And, Scott moves a ton of air.
Yeah, you can hear it.
He moves a ton of air, and it's fast. And that's his sound. So I think if you were playing a traditional drawn French-style tone hole saxophone, and you were playing a mouthpiece with a really closed tip opening and a really stiff reed, you can only move so much air through that.
Yeah.
You can only move so much air through that. So I think in that sense, yes, it does require less air. If you take a rolled tone hole instrument and you put a giant mouthpiece on it, like I do on my tenor with my Jody Jazz Jet 7-star, which, you could drive a car between the reed and the tip of the mouthpiece, put that on a rolled tone hole tenor, you've got to move some air.
Yeah.
You've got to move some air. It's like I said, it's like a late 1960s era muscle car. You're driving with both feet, you've got a clutch, you got a gear shift, and that's kind of how I see the rolled tone hole instruments.
A V8 engine?
It's a V8, that's right. Yeah, it's orange and flies. No.
I could have used that today with the traffic, just flying over it. No, but
That's
anyway,
right.
I digress. So, listen, Jeremiah, are there any other things that you want to tell us with regard to PMauriat that's happening, that's new since the last time we spoke?
Well, so this year at NAMM, our only true new instrument here on this booth is our Venus saxophone. I know that there are some design. We're having some discussions as we kind of draw the 20th anniversary series to a close. So that is drawing to a close. However, we are going to replace it with something very similar design, similar construction. Don't know all the details yet, but we hope to unveil that at this time next year. And the only thing I would say is the PMauriat, the Venus saxophones, they do ship in the touring case.
Yeah, can we pull one of those out here for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
And so the touring case is my favorite of our cases. And why specifically? Lumbar pad.
Yes, absolutely.
When you're going through the airport with a tenor sax on your back or an alto sax, this lumbar pad, which doubles as a pocket, is fantastic. These are actual real backpack straps with carabiners on the clip there, so it's not going to come undone. It's a molded interior, has interior storage, and what is unique about these is they're not made by a typical saxophone or instrument case company. These are made by the Eminent Luggage Corporation in Taiwan, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, manufacturers of luggage. So various brands that you probably have in your closet, they've made that suitcase. And so this comes from a perspective of travel, of durability, of standing up, as you go through the airport security line, as you're putting in an equipment truck, as you're doing all of those kinds of things. So, the Venus saxophone ships in this case, as does our remaining 20th anniversary saxophones. They ship in this case, or you can purchase this separately should you just want this for your saxophone.
That's awesome. Yeah, and they're beautiful looking too. And it looks like they're really solid. You don't have to worry about your horn's protected.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, it is. And so it's made from polycarbonate, not ABS.
I was going to ask. Okay.
So it's got the same protective properties as an ABS case, but it's lighter. It's not heavy, and you're not adding a ton of weight to an instrument, particularly if you're talking about a tenor that's already kind of heavy.
Yeah, and thinking about that too, I mean, I know for me, just like schlepping through the airport, and I've got my tenor on my back and, other types of things, it's a pain. It really is a pain. It's heavy, and, we don't want to be dealing with that. But listen, Jeremiah, this was awesome. Once again, sharing such incredible information beyond even PMauriat, but congratulations on this. And we're going to hopefully catch some of Leah's playing throughout the weekend, so you can get an idea of what's going on with that. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna, and thanks for everything you do for our saxophone community.
Oh, I appreciate
Much
that.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Tune in.
That's right.